Well, I may have bitten off more than I intended to here, but one way or another, it was going to be something with some danger to it. This is Blue Max, the old GDW version of it. And let me give you a little of my background. This is one of a very, very few games that I played a lot of with other people and really, really enjoyed it. And I mean like stupidly a lot. Like we used to have a group that played it in college between classes or whatever. We had a gaming club that was kind of away from where everybody could take classes, but like nobody actually went to school in that area, in that campus, but we used to go down there, and it was on my way home from classes, were easy for me to get to from home because I lived near there. And I used to go there and just hang out for large periods of time. I also had my work office in the same building, so there were real advantages to that. Anyway, when I first saw it, normally we played cards and other short things to entertain ourselves, even though we were supposedly a gaming group. But we every so often did something kind of a little bigger. That's, for example, where I first played 1830 and a number of other games, Rail Baron. There wasn't a real heavy wargamer community in down there. There were maybe 3 of us who were really kind of into war games, so we usually didn't get any war games played. One guy would sit there and basically be there all day long, every day, and he'd be playing either solitaire war games or like solitaire sports games, and nobody really wanted to play 2-player war games. I'm sure he would have, but we'd just end up playing cards or whatever and draw him away from whatever he was doing. But we had one guy who was not a war gamer for the most part, who brought this sucker in, and it's kind of like, well, it's simple. It's kind of Ace of Aces, which I think I've covered already. I'm not sure. It's kind of Ace of Aces set, on a board. I'm like, wow, okay. That's going to be stupidly simple, but all right. It's not. It has some similarities in the sense that you have these movement patterns that you follow, which are based for each plane, and you have a number of different maneuvers that each plane can do, and some restrictions on them, etc., which makes it somewhat, similar in a way, that you're following certain specific patterns of movement. But what it does is it generates a fairly easy means of recording plotted movement without, going full hog in the, you can almost see it there, in the Wings style. It's under a Spanier there. I got another copy, the more modern one as well. And out of all the World War I airplane games, this is by far the one that I played the most. We used to just get together. Games would take maybe an hour. We'd have big groups of people, 6 to 8 people maybe, sometimes less than that, sometimes as few as 4. But, just a bunch of people flying planes. And there was a campaign going where we kept track of pilots, and if you didn't show up for, if you weren't there for a battle for a while or whatever, that's fine. You just lost opportunities to get shot down or to advance in capability. Anyway, it was a lot of fun, and I got a problem. I am missing something. I thought I had everything. Son of a bitch. I'm missing the combat counters for this. The damage counters. I thought it was a new, I mean, obviously it wasn't a brand new copy, but I think I punched everything and clipped them. What's weird is I have an extra one of this. So this may not be playable. Son of a bitch. Yeah, I'm missing the 36 damage chits, 5/8 of an inch counters. They should be about the same as these. I thought I had everything, and this fucking sucks. Well, we may have to come back with some other words. Anyway, what happened was I've been wanting to get this for a while, or for a long time, but didn't realize that it's not, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm saying now. I'm so distraught because I thought I had the complete game. I was so happy for it. It's not something I just picked up recently. I picked this up way back in Phoenix. But what happened was I bought the new version of it first, saying, ooh, I want the new version. And that's my saving grace here, because it's not the same, and it's got a different combat system, but what it means is that I can piece together a game out of the two of them, I guess. But I was very disappointed. It's got beautiful components, and I'll bring it up and show it in a moment. But what it doesn't have is it doesn't have as many airplane choices. Now, this is a pretty limited quantity of airplanes anyway. Always my objection to Blue Max was the limited number of planes that it had. There were certainly types that I thought that there should be that there weren't. But yeah, it did not have the selection of planes that Wings or even Richthofen's War had. Another thing is the campaign rules are a little limited for it. All right, let me go through the rules for this. Then I'll bring up the other one, go through the rules for that, and then I'll figure out what the fuck I'm doing. So the rules for this are actually pretty damn simple. And the other one are too, but they're more Euro style, modern, Euro and AT style rules that are modern. They're like, it's hard to discern what's going on. So for this one, you throw the damage chits that I don't have into a cup, and probably somebody put them in a coffee cup and drank them or something. And those are going to be your combat, the effects that you get from combat. You pick your plane and you grab an aircraft maneuver schedule, and you get an aircraft sheet. And for the aircraft sheet, and I can use regular paper for this. For the aircraft sheet, you kind of mark off and indicate which part, how big your plane actually is. And that information is present somewhere, the different planes. Aircraft record. Okay, so I'm not seeing, could be back here. Yeah, we got the aircraft characteristic sheet, which tells you some pieces of information that you need to fill out on your record sheet, including how many hits you have in each of these different locations, how much fuel you have, what kind of weapons you're armed with, and then how high the plane can fly. There's also a chart, and this is important for the campaign game, but also for lining up and making sure you've got planes from the right era. So, Newport 17s are available throughout the entire war from this point on, but they're pretty outmoded once you start getting into this era. So anyway. You face hex sides. Let me explain the maneuver schedule. What it has on it, it shows the starting, so for any given maneuver, It shows the starting facing of the plane and how it'll end up. And then it's got a code under it, which you'll be writing as your maneuver for the turn. You can also note down whether or not there's any special conditions affecting you, but also if you're climbing, diving, stuff like that. Okay. Combat, and there's a partial copy of it here. No, complete copy of it there. Okay, combat is handled using this chart. And if you line up a shot on someone, you look at how far away you are, and that'll be the base value of your firepower. If you're really close, you get a bigger firepower value, and as you go out further, you get less. But there are modifiers which apply at each range based on how long a burst of fire you want to do. Everything's short and medium bursts are safe. A long burst means that you have a chance of jamming your gun. Generally, people fire medium or long bursts, though. Stability, how stable the platform is of the attacking plane, affects how well it can hit. So you don't need different combat charts for each plane. If the target's stalled, that gives you a bonus. If you're going too fast, you get a penalty. If you only have one gun on your plane, now the assumption here is that the planes have 2 machine guns, but some of the earlier planes only have 1, and you could also have a gunshot out. If you're firing pretty much anything other than directly tailing or head-to-head against an opponent, you're going to get a penalty for deflection. But if you fired at the same target last turn, you get a bonus. If you're tailing the target, you get a bonus. And if you're at a different altitude, you get a bonus. I guess because more of the plane's exposed. Okay. That always confused me. How is this resolved? Well, what happens is you look up your particular combat value with all the modifiers involved, and you roll a die, and you'll get a number of blue counters and a number of red counters. Now, the combat chart, the combat system for the original game was the 36 counters. One side's blue, one side's red. The blues are generally better, more damaging, and you'd pull those chits and take the effect on the enemy plane that way. Now, let's take a look at what you do. At the beginning of the game, you pick your planes, whatever. You fill out your sheet. You set up on one side or the other, the Allies and the Axis. You'd think GDW should know better. Okay. Now, what happens is you determine whether or not you're tailing someone, which is basically your front arc has their ass arc directly in it. And it's possible that you can have multiple planes tailing each other. It's possible that you could have an entire circle of planes. Those are both special cases that can be handled otherwise. But the base advantage of tailing is that your opponent tells you, I'm going left, straight, or right. And then you know that they are limited to maneuvers based on that decision. They may also have to tell you their climb. Yeah, they also have to pass you an altitude marker, which says up, down, or level. Now, I don't have the left, straight, or right. It really looks like, like a counter sheet was missing or something. Okay. I'm kind of screwed, but I can do without the left, straight, or rights. Okay. And they hand these to you before you choose your maneuver. They can do it before they choose their maneuver, too. In the case of a circular set of tails, that's what you'd have to do. The next thing is each player picks a maneuver. Now, anybody who's being tailed has to follow what they gave to the people who are tailing them. You're going to pay fuel equal to the speed of what you did. The speed in the number, like 15L3, well, that's maneuver 15 going to the left with a speed of 3. And the speeds are indicated along here as well. There's some restrictions to what maneuvers you can pick. You can't pick a non-repeatable maneuver after you picked another non-repeatable maneuver. So you can't do 2 of them in a row. And then there's restricted maneuvers, which can only be, these are even more extreme. You can only do these if you did a simple straight, which is 2, 3, 4, 5. That'll be this line maneuver. And yeah, it's 2, 3, 4, 5. It's not 6, right? It doesn't allow you to do some of the other straights. Okay. So you expend your fuel. If you don't have enough fuel, you can't do the maneuver. If you're out of fuel, you'll start gliding. Then everybody all together moves simultaneously, matching exactly what they have on here. There's no collisions or anything like that. Then each player has the option to fire their machine guns, and they make a firing selection secretly. They pick a target and how long a burst they're firing, basically. After everybody's made their decision, then you resolve them all using this. And these counters often come with just damage, but sometimes they come with certain special special criticals, basically. And do I have them here? I don't know where I have them. I don't know. They're on the back of the book, but anyway, things can happen, like your plane can catch on fire, or your pilot could be dead. They suggest taking the counter for the pilot insta-kill out of the game for sort of to prevent somebody from getting a really lucky shot. Personally, I liked it in there, and certainly in the campaign it was fun. Okay. Right. So everybody takes their damage, drawing chits. If multiple people fired on a specific, on a single target, that target takes all its hits at once. So all the chits go in the cup, and they draw them one at a time until they've taken all their damage. And that increases the chances of things like pilot kills, fuel tank hit, explodes, stuff like that. Then if you have jammed guns and you did the correct type of maneuver, you can try to unjam your guns. And if your airplane is in a spin, you can make a die roll to come out of the spin. Let me just get to that. There we go. So gun jamming, you're able to recover from that by doing an unrestricted straight maneuver, which there's quite a few of them, right? That's anything in this column. And in fact, you can even do non-repeatables. You just can't do restricteds. And you make a die roll. On a 4, 5, or 6, you unjam your gun. And it'll be usable next turn. If you're in a spin, on a 3, 4, 5, or 6, you recover. However, if you're a novice pilot, you only recover on a 4, 5, or 6. And you're faced randomly. Okay. And also when you're in spin, you drop a level. So where are we here? We already kind of went through combat. We didn't go through some of the special effects of combat. Which are here. So if all your wing, fuselage, or tail boxes end up marked off, your plane becomes uncontrollable and you go into a spin from which you can't recover. Basically, you're dead. I don't know why you stay on the board. You're just spinning down and it's fun to watch. And people can shoot you if they want. maybe they can get the kill that way. If you've taken any combat damage to your tail or wing in the previous combat step, on a 5 or 6, the aircraft goes into a spin. And again, the chits tell you something like 3 wing hits, you know. If you're a novice, you go into a spin more often. If all your engine or fuel boxes are knocked off, you no longer have power and you have to glide. Now gliding, I believe, there we go. If you're out of fuel or you have no engine, you must glide. You're only allowed, only planes that must glide are able to. You select maneuvers 2 or 9. 2 is a straight at speed 2, and 9 is this little curvy thing, also at speed 2. Now, everything is secret in this game, more or less. So, like, the hits that you're handed, you don't reveal those unless they're obvious, and there's a list of which ones are obvious. So, for example, if you're gliding, your opponents may not know you're gliding unless they're paying attention to what's going on. Okay. If you're hit directly from the front, any tail hits you draw become engine hits. If you're hit directly from the rear, all your engine hits become tail hits. There's also some special attacks that can happen, and they're handled in this special damage chart, which I was unable to see. There it is. So like fuel tank hit, explode, that kills you. But you have a number of them that have some special abilities. So like rudder jams, must do right-left maneuvers. For the number of turns given on the chit, you must choose maneuvers with the correct direction control. Anyway, these you basically follow, and some of them are fixable, like smoke and fire. Some of them, like observe or killed, you're not going to be able to fix for the course of the scenario. Okay. The secrecy extends to your partners as well, people on your same side. They don't know anything about your plane either. Everything's public or private. There's no kind of in between. However, and they don't know what maneuvers you're picking, but there's one exception to that, which is formation flying, which is kind of an optional role. Someone can come on the board and up to 2 other people can be his wingmen. He can show them in order what maneuver he's going to do, and they have the option to choose the exact same maneuver. There's no restriction, though, about how far apart they are, which makes things kind of weird. Oh, wait. In the same hex as the squadron leader and facing the same direction. Yeah, so you all have to be stacked in the same hex. Remember, there's no collision or anything. I've never seen anybody flying in formation, probably because of that same hex thing. Okay. So, you're allowed to try to escape the game by flying off the edge of the map behind your side start line. And if you land in either friendly territory or you land in enemy territory and successfully get a roll to get away. If you land into enemy territory and you're not returned, you're captured. If you're shot down, you're crashed and destroyed. A few special rules on things. Lewis gun. Lewis gun has to keep track of ammunition. We have Lewis gun ammunition listed over here. Basically, each Lewis gun has a number of shots that it can perform. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 10 shots in a row. And once it runs out of those, it has to take some time to swap out magazines. And you only have a limited number of magazines total. Now, those shots cost you 1 box for short bursts, 2 boxes for medium, and 3 for a long burst. There's one special plane, the SE-5A, which mounts a Lewis gun and a normal forward-facing gun. The Lewis gun's forward-facing too for this game. Technically, it was on a string and you could do some weird shit with it, but in the event that the Lewis gun only has enough shot for a short burst, you can fire a long burst with your regular guns, taking a risk of jamming them, and it combines to be a medium burst, so you get the benefit for a medium burst. The Bristol has 2 Lewis guns, and it uses 2 magazines at once. I guess if one of the barrels dies or something, you could swap things. You could use the extra ammo in that. The Halberstadt and the Bristol have an extra crew member who sits behind the pilot. He has his own weapons and he fires them independently of the pilot. And I guess there's one thing: if the plane is, if the pilot's shot, you might be able to fire guns, but I don't think you can fire if you're in a spin. Okay. Altitude, there are 5 altitude levels in this game. I wish those were the counters that were missing. I could fake them. Very low, low, medium, high, and very high. And you're allowed to climb or dive. However, there are some restrictions. You start the game at any altitude you're capable of flying at. This is usually your maximum altitude. You can drop to the next lower altitude by diving. You put an L after your order, or a D after your order, or a C after your order for climbing. And you have to do at least speed 2 or more, and it costs you 1 less fuel to do it. For climbing, you can climb, you put a C after a non-restricted maneuver with a speed of 2 or more. At the end of the maneuver, you're at the next higher altitude, but you can't climb at maximum speed, so you have to go 1 less than maximum speed at least. If you climb, you use an extra fuel box, and you can never reach your maximum altitude again in the course of the scenario. That's not to say you can't reach that higher cruising altitude, you can't get to it in the midst of the dogfight. If you're at very low altitude, you can dive to ground level as long as you're performing a straight maneuver and you've landed. If you try to climb to an altitude you can't reach, you stall. You could also choose maneuver 1, which is here, which is a voluntary stall as well. And if you try to stall, or if you end up stalling, you make a roll. On a 5 or a 6, you're thrown into a spin. A novice has an easier time going into a spin. If you're in a spin, there's a spin maneuver on here somewhere. I don't see it. There's a stall maneuver. I think they mean spin there, actually. Basically what happens is you drop 1 level of altitude, you can't select a maneuver, you put 0S2, and it eats up 2 fuel boxes. You can try to pull out of the spin, as I mentioned before. Eventually you're going to hit the ground. You can tail at the same or adjacent altitudes. If you dive without landing into the ground, you crash. You can attack planes that are at the same altitude or one immediately adjacent to it. If you're firing at the next highest altitude, you have to be in nose-up position, which means your next turn you must try to climb. This can force you to stall if you're at your maximum height, or if you can't climb for whatever reason because you're not going fast enough or something. Okay. In addition to the core rules, there's the idea of a campaign game. The base idea of a campaign game, and I'm not going to go into too much detail of it, is that you fly a battle one at a time. A bunch of people get together, you fly one. You get some points for each turn that you're on the board, each airplane you shoot down. Once you get 50 experience points, you go up to a veteran, where you don't have the penalties of a novice. If you've shot down 5 or more aircraft, you become an ace. Now, being an ace, I don't think gives you anything in and of itself except that you can say it to people. Well, no, it gives you an ability, each ace level. But also your experience points gives you abilities. And your abilities can be grabbed from here. So you can have things like, hey, I can't be tailed by anyone who's not an ace, or gunnery, I get a bonus to my combat die roll. And that's about it. All right. And I'm really kind of bummed about not having the counters I thought I did. But what I'm going to do, I obviously can't do what I intended to do, which was set this up and start playing it. So what I'm going to do instead is, I guess I'm going to take a look at the differences that the new version of the game presents, and then try to figure out what I can play with. I like this version better because it has more different types of planes. It has more plane counters in total. It's lower production quality, but the trade-off is you had something better. But the new version uses some wacky dice, and I think it's trying to duplicate the combat chits. Instead of drawing the chits, you roll dice for them. So no result, every result becomes possible, but I'm not absolutely certain of that. And I want to look through it to make sure that other things are indeed the same. So for example, it has maneuver charts. Maybe they're not the same maneuver charts, but I doubt that that's the case. So I'll be back in a bit. Okay, so here's the thing. I found some counter redesign that includes the combat counters. And since that's the game I'm used to and I want to present that, I'm going to do that. So it's going to be a little while before I actually get this played, unfortunately. And I'll make those extra counters, and that'll include some of the additional counters that I should have here. They'll be shitty quality. They won't be, die cut counters. They'll just be pieces of paper glued together, probably. Maybe sandwiched on a piece of stock, because it would be nice to have something somewhat sturdy. But at least it'll let me play it under the original conditions, and then I'll come back, or maybe I'll jump to the other version of the game and just play that as it stands. It's not very different, but the combat system is. So I can't just substitute chits in there. It's got a dice and card based system that is just a different game, in terms of the combat system. But we'll take a look at what the two look like, and that'll be this design. I think that's actually got a different BGG entry, so I kind of didn't want to mix the two. All right, let's send this up, and yeah, you're not getting as much as you'd like, but we'll get it played.